The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. On behalf of AGA, welcome to today's free members-only webinar, Leverage LinkedIn to Up Your Reputation and Relevance. I'm Susan Fritzlin, AGA's Chief Operating Officer. Today's program will be presented by Jen Dalton, who is the CEO and founder of Brand Mirror. Just a little things about Jen. She obviously has her own branding business, and she's a certified brand strategist. She enables individuals and companies to define their brand and differentiate themselves in authentic, credible, and relevant ways to their target audience and market. So just a few housekeeping items before Jen gets started. As many of you know, if you participate in our events, we adhere to NASBA for CPE. To receive the credit for today's session, you will need to verify your attendance by recording the letters that will appear in the top left-hand corner of the screen at unannounced times. So we've got a sample slide up there. So there'll be 3 letters throughout the course of this next hour. So take note of those letters you see, because immediately following the webinar, a survey will appear on your screen and you'll have to input those letters. And in about a week, we will send you an email stating that your CPE certificate is ready to be downloaded from the website. We'd love to hear your questions as well today. You can submit them at any time by using the chat feature on the right-hand side of the screen. And Kia's here with me too, Kia Lore. And we'll be monitoring those, and if when Jen's speaking, if there's a relevant question, we will ask her to take the question. Handout materials are available in the handout section of the GoToWebinar module. Hopefully you've downloaded them, or please download them before exiting the webinar. We will be recording today's webinar and posting it to the members-only site, so you can access this later if you'd like. So I think now we're ready to get started here. So I am going to turn this over to Jen.
Great, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you everybody for joining in. I am excited to be here and talk with all of you. I'm especially excited because we are going to share and talk about not only personal brand and why it matters, we are also going to have a lucky AGA member who's a guinea pig. And so I will show you some before and after changes and why we made them on LinkedIn to really highlight what's unique about this person and what you might do for yourself. And then I'll also show some LinkedIn in real time. So if you have questions about specific things, especially when we get to the real time, do ask. I'm absolutely happy to answer questions. The main goal of today is to really help you understand how to position yourself, how to make sure you stand out, and why LinkedIn can matter and how it can help. A lot of people think LinkedIn is only for job search, but the reality is, of the 500 million plus members on LinkedIn, only about 40% of the activity on LinkedIn is related to job search. The other 60% is really about networking, sharing contacts with each other, and also sharing content. So as we go through this, I think it's important to make sure we all realize how useful LinkedIn can be, and I think the profile we go through will definitely show that. So let me talk a little bit about personal branding and why it matters. I'm imagining most people have heard the phrase personal brand. It really hasn't started to take hold until the last few years, although the idea of it came around in the late 90s. And it really was this idea of, if you're not managing your reputation and really thinking about not necessarily marketing yourself, sometimes people think that sounds a lot like branding, but just being an advocate and being confident in your abilities, you can miss out on a lot of opportunities. And even if you, because we all have our own insecurities, even if you're insecure, I love this photo of the goldfish, how do you show up in a very clear and intentional way? And so one of the things that is really important about personal brand is not only how you show up, also how you make people feel and what others say about you, especially, for example, if you're not in the room. And so I'm going to go back to the how you make people feel. I think this is a really important one to call out. What is it that people sense about you? Do they like working with you? Do they feel like you are collaborative? We all have people when they call us on our cell phone, we look at our cell phone and we go, maybe I don't want to take that call right now, I'll call them later. And we have people that will drop, we'll drop what we're doing and pick up the phone. So really knowing how are you showing up, what do other people say about you? It is absolutely reputation. And so again, none of us have our own personal chief marketing officer. It's really up to us to make sure we're clear about what do we want to be known for and how do people know about us. Because let's face it, if you're out of sight, you're out of mind. Oops, we went a little bit too far ahead. Let me back up a little bit. So one of the things that I think is also important, and I talk with people I work with all the time, telepathy is not a strategy, right? We cannot communicate mentally what it is that we are amazing at. I mean, we certainly can try, but it doesn't work. And so really understanding how to build a plan around your personal brand so that you don't feel overwhelmed by it. You really want to be able to be confident and clear with your brand. One of the things that's important to think about is what are the conversations you should be a part of. So as you think about, especially on LinkedIn or online, where is it you want to show up? And so specifically today, I'll focus a lot more on AGA and really how that affected the choices we made with the LinkedIn profile that we modified. So one of the things to think about, there are, I'm sure, internal sites, but also just showing up in person. Are you able to provide a spectrum? If you look at each of these boxes, and on the X is the personal brand, are you just there or are you actually highly engaged? And on the bottom are your stakeholders, whether they're internal or external. These are a nice way to look at how are you showing up overall. So providing leadership and clarity. What are you talking about with people you work with, whether it's online or in person? How are you leading the business forward when you communicate? That could be online. When you post information online, for example, on LinkedIn, is it innovative news? Is it relevant? Is it timely? Are you connecting with people you work with across, for example, across AGA, right? Are you building relationships? That's a very key stakeholder. But how are you connecting with people through LinkedIn? How are you giving a face to your organization? So I've looked at some LinkedIn profiles where there's not even a headshot or a picture, and it's hard to have a relationship or build trust if you don't even know what they look like. And so how are you representing the organization you're at? Although LinkedIn is a professional platform and everything should be professional on it, it still is your LinkedIn profile, not your company's. But if you want to be a thought leader, which is this last category, and again, you get to decide what that means. It doesn't mean you have to go be a speaker or write a book. It could mean, hey, I just want to confidently do stuff online and know that I'm not messing up. But how are you showing up, and what does that look like? So it is all about visibility and relevance. And so one of the things that Salim and I worked on was, what is it he wants to be known for? So if you took a second and thought about 3 things, right? What are the 3 things you want to be known for? And I like Venn diagrams because there are times when there should be times when your skills overlap, and that is really what helps you stand out. So sometimes people are concerned that, what I do isn't that unique. I'm like other people. How do I stand out? But when you start to use a Venn diagram, you can see that if you're really good at analytics and technology, but let's say you're also really good at communication, when you mix those together, it can be pretty powerful. So think about what those 3 things would be for you. For Salim, what we worked on was this notion of collaboration. So as a senior advisor at the Department of Transportation and the DC President chapter for AGA, it makes sense that collaboration is something he has to do. And it's a bit higher level strategic, especially when you think about strategic planning, which is some of the elements that he works on, as well as the financial management. There are a lot of people that he needs to collaborate with, work with. And if he wants to be known as someone who does collaborate and who's very good at aligning people and resources to achieve a common goal, how does that show up? Because before you go and put anything on LinkedIn, you want to know, what am I even putting on there? What would I say? And so this is a good way to think about, this is sort of the box you want to play in. Innovation, so coming up with creative solutions and thinking differently. So one of the things he and I discussed was this idea of when he goes to work with folks in the financial management team or space, testing and learning process changes. If you're going to fix one process, test it with a small group, and if it works, then roll it out. And so overall, as you look at this, what's really important is understanding what kind of leader do you want to be. And so for his leadership statement, which I crafted, so he can definitely chime in and tweak it, of course. But if you don't have your own leadership statement, it's hard to know what you're standing for and what's important to you. In this case, it's very focused on these 3 skills. They don't necessarily have to be just in the role he's in, though, right? They're more expansive. They're broader than that. So how does this show up at Department of Transportation, but also how does it show up at AGA? And he could look at these circles and at this leadership statement, which really is 3 things. One, it's what kind of leader are you? So maybe you're an empathetic leader, maybe you're an inquisitive leader, maybe you're a direct leader that has pros and cons. What do you want to do? Right? What is your mission? What are you committed to doing? For him, it's creating value within an organization. And then those 3 circles are the things you bring to bear, the skills, the things you're known for. Strategic decision-making, innovation, testing, and learning to stay relevant. And so the strategic decision-making is really a bit a part of collaboration, because he's got to work with other people to figure out where are we putting people, and he obviously provides his own insights. So now that we know this, now that we know leadership statement and these 3 skills, now we can go do some interesting things on LinkedIn. Before I move forward, any questions on the 3 circles? I believe in simplicity and keeping it simple. It makes it a lot easier to be clear. And this is a great exercise to do. All right, so I'm going to move on.
No questions yet.
Thank you.
Yep.
So the first thing I do, and I don't know about you guys, but the first thing I do is Google someone and just see what comes up. If you've never done that, I highly recommend it. It can be very informative. It's very important to look at not only what shows up on the first page, but look at news and video and see what's out there. I've had some clients who they had material online they had even forgotten they did, whether it was a paper or a video, and that sounds crazy, but over a career, you may forget some things, but Google will help you find it. And then, of course, LinkedIn. And LinkedIn, usually the reason you want to have a great LinkedIn profile is because it will be one of the things you see on your Google results. And then in this particular case, the one thing I'll call out, the LinkedIn profile was actually the first list. This is just underneath that on the first results of Google, but was George Mason. So for Salim, I did do some research to figure out, well, if somebody didn't know him and they were trying to get to know him, what's even out there? And so he did speak at George Mason at a GovCon event. So that's interesting, right? And it was also about unlocking organizational value was the name of the summit. And so this sort of lines back to what he had on the things he's good at, right? Creating value in his leadership statement. So before we jump into the next page, one of the things you can think about when you try to think through, how do I show up online? What do I want to put online? The 4 I's that are not about you. So as we think about information we're putting online, it can either be to inform people. You could just say, hey, there's this new regulation change. It's important to know, here's why. It could be to influence. Let's say you actually do want to shift a policy or shift a perception. Let's say you want to inspire. A lot of people do quotes, less so on LinkedIn. That's more Facebook and Twitter. But maybe you want to share an inspirational story about a fellow colleague in the AGA and some cool project they did or worked on. The last one is Ignite. This is a bit more of a really pushing to drive change. And again, it just depends on the role you're in and what you're doing and how you want to go about communicating it. We see this a lot more in political organizations, grassroots, things like that. But I wanted to share that because I think that's helpful as we look at what are we sharing on his profile. Sorry, I will get to the next page. So don't forget the letter at the top. The second thing I want to share is a framework that I developed specifically for LinkedIn and resume work. A lot of people on their resume and on LinkedIn leave stuff out. And a lot of people either don't have anything on their LinkedIn profile or they copy and paste it from their resume, which doesn't help because they're missing some key pieces of information. On your LinkedIn profile, you absolutely want to include what's the impact you've made. If you joined a team 4 years ago, what are some of the things that you've put in place that have now made it different? Most people put their activities. I generated reports. I balanced this. I did that. And that doesn't really tell someone something about what you do. So you can use metrics to say, I manage this many people. I have a budget of this much. I delivered 4 innovative accounting projects in the last year. You can share proximity. Who do you work with? Do you report into the CEO? Do you report into the board as well as the leadership C-suite? Or maybe you develop reports for vendors or partners, but who is it you work with? Because that helps people know, when I reach out to you, what should I be asking your help with, or what offer should I be making to you? A lot of people also have the same role, and so it helps if you give a little bit of a description of the role so that they know the scope of what you do. I also think it's important to make it engaging. Don't start with, I've been in the industry for 20 years. That's a bit Charlie Brown, and it gets a little bit, want. So think about what's an interesting statement, question, fact that you want to start with. And then the last piece is over time. When you look at your LinkedIn profile over time, your roles should look like they either are expanding in scope or changing as far as scale. So they could be growing in what you're accountable for, but also how much. And as you're looking at your LinkedIn story, does it show that? All right. So as you remember earlier, we had the leadership statement. So when you look on the right, this is a screenshot of Salim's top box on LinkedIn. That's what I call it, as the top box. Does it tell you that he is a collaborative leader? Does it tell you he likes creating value or does anything related to strategy or innovation? It's not a bad profile picture. I like the picture. I like the flag behind him. That looks good. I think if you wanted to focus more on innovation, you could think about getting a different headshot that was less government and more white background modern. But if you're in the government, it makes sense to have a picture that sort of helps communicate that. If I look at the values and the strategic planning under expertise and evidence, do any of these show up? And for me, really, the answer was no, right? I went to his profile and I was like, I couldn't have told you that he does financial management or strategic planning. That's not there. And so when we look at the updated profile, which you'll see on the bottom, I had thought about doing a background photo of where you work, right? It could be the DC market or it could be Chicago or Atlanta, wherever, like a skyline. But I didn't want it to have all of the government buildings and look too government. But at the same time, I wanted it to look more innovative and edgy because that's what we just talked about as brand being, even though the capital pictures are always beautiful. And so we went with a light bulb photo. And then underneath his name, you'll see this title. This title really matters because that drives keyword results in LinkedIn. So just like Google, when you type in a word, Google pulls up things that have that word related to it. LinkedIn is the same. So because he didn't have strategic planning or financial management, it really wouldn't help move his profile up in results. So as you can see, I have senior advisor, strategic planning and financial management. I put it next, and then I did the organization. There is a character limit of 120 characters, so you can play around with it in Word. The pipe stem, which is a shift, and then the button above enter, is a nice way to break up some of the words. I could also put in here innovative or change agent or innovation within government. I think sometimes people don't perceive government as innovation, so that may be a little bit at odds. But you get to choose the words that go here. Just be mindful of who's trying to find you, and are those words going to help you with your brand or help you convey the right message. So the next part of LinkedIn I want to look at is, let me see if I can turn the page. I don't want to go too far ahead. So we had the top box. There was no summary. So the next thing I'm looking at, and summary is like a short bio. You do have to add that. It doesn't come as an option ready to go unless you put content in it. So the next piece was his experience. Okay, well, if I look at his experience, do I get a sense of what he does? And do I get a sense of that impress framework? What's the impact? What are the metrics? What's the proximity? The good thing is I do see proximity, right? I see senior advisor to the chief financial officer, and he does talk about what his role is. So that's good. But I have no idea what else he does. I don't know the impact. I don't know what he did at the Smithsonian, which looks super cool. The logos, if the logos are not here, that means you're not choosing the organization effectively on LinkedIn. And so this is the new version. So I'll call out a couple of things. One is that I attached it to Department of Transportation, so the logo shows up. Two, you'll notice on the title, I have senior advisor, I have the pipe stem, the vertical mark. You could also do a comma. And then I put, again, strategic planning and financial management, because I want those words to be part of his brand. And if you're consistent and say things enough or show them enough, because you have to walk the talk, of course, then people will start to associate that with your brand. Now I left what he had at the top for the most part. And then I added in some key accomplishments. This I did pull from his resume. And so I actually would want to go in and rework some of these, but I wanted to show you how different it looks when you add in that experience. And then at the bottom, there's two pieces of media, and I'll show you how to add these later. The question I would ask you for your LinkedIn profile, one, who comes to your profile, which you can figure out and look at who's viewed my profile. But the second one is, what do you want them to do when they come to your profile? Do you want them to download, maybe it's a checklist for the AGA, how to find the chapter in Europe, get the most out of AGA. Maybe it's a video. What is it that people would find useful when they come to your profile? In this case, I linked to the budget page on the transportation.gov because that's probably something that people would want to see. It's public, and he is in the financial management part. And then I linked just to the DOT website. So think about that. What would you put? Maybe, so the other thing is, if you do team building, put a picture of your team builder doing community service. Put a link to the latest news or press release. So there's a lot of different things you could put on your profile that just let people know you are paying attention to your own profile, and you're not missing any big gaps, right? You're really being thoughtful. And I would much rather work with someone who's thoughtful than someone who leaves things blank. And it's no reflection on the person, but the reality is, I mean, that makes a much better impression. So think about the media you would add. So here's another thing that I did. So before, there was no mention of the AGA. It was in the volunteer opportunities, But if you're in an organization where you sit on the board or where you're a very active member and where the organization is important for your brand, and that is a big part of what you do, consider adding it to the experience. Because a lot of times people won't scroll far enough down to look at the volunteer work. And if you're a chapter president, then you definitely want to have an AGA piece here. And so the content I put in here, which Celine may want to take out or tweak or change, was actually the letter from him to the DC chapter members. But it works pretty well here because it talks about what's his goal for the chapter. And it talks about what are they offering and what are they doing throughout the year. And so I have a link to the DC chapter news page, and I have a link to the overall AGA. So if you haven't put AGA on your profile, think about maybe adding it as an element of experience, especially and add those to your profile. They may not be on there. So that's one. So you may have endorsements for skills that you're missing on your profile. The second thing I'll say is, let's say you have them on your profile and you don't like them, or they're not quite the right fit. It used to be LinkedIn would show you at least 10. Now they only show you 3. So if I look at this list and I compare it with what's the evidence in the leadership statement, the financial analysis, okay. The program management, I'm not sure. I mean, I'm sure he's good at it, but is that what he actually wants? Because we've talked about innovation and strategy and other things that might be a better fit. So you can click on this little pencil and rotate your skills up or down and rearrange them. You could also click add a new skill and add in the skills that maybe you think are missing. I wouldn't overdo it. You can have up to like 50. Pick your top 5 or 10 and make sure these really reflect you, because when people come here and they log into their LinkedIn profile, they'll get a little message that says, oh, do you want to endorse Salim for this or Jen for this or whatnot? You may click yes, but if it's not the right skill, I wouldn't click it if you know the person. If it is the right skill, great, click away. When you get to 99 plus, then you are seen by LinkedIn as an expert, and this moves you up in search results. So it does matter, and it does make a difference. And I will also say when people move from doing project work, let's say an entry level or up 1 or 2 levels, start switching into management and leadership positions, you may want to revisit this and do something in the leadership space, maybe something that's not so functional. So just something to think about. You can go back to your 3 circles and see how those line up with these 3 words. So for Salim, I added strategic planning and risk management. I was struggling, do we want to move innovation? And so that'll be a question I follow up with him on. But if these are not in the right order, people will see the skills at the top, and that's what they will click on. So you'll be reinforcing the wrong skills. And it seems like an awful waste. So questions on the skills and endorsements. These are different than recommendations, which I'll cover in a minute. But skills and endorsements are extremely important. They should mirror up also with your resume, right? If you think about any collateral you're doing, with your bio, if you have one, with what you have on your internal website, things like that.
Hey Jen, there is one question.
Yeah.
For the position title, is it appropriate to create a descriptive position title rather than use your formal job title that may not convey what you do very
Yeah,
well?
that's a great question. I think it's important to have the actual title. And then that's why I love using like a pipe stem or comma, and you can put in a more descriptive piece. So like I had, Salim had senior advisor. We could have left that, but when I first got to his profile, I was like, what does senior mean and what does advisor mean? Because that doesn't clarify. So to your point, adding in information like strategic planning, financial management, it could be cross-functional leader. It could give more depth. And so you don't want to pick 20 words. You probably have 5 or 6 words you can have space for after your title. But I absolutely think for the experience section, when you're doing the job title, you should add words that are meaningful to who's coming to your profile and also help you with search results. For sure, 100%. Otherwise, it's wasted space. So again, think about the 3 skills. That's what's visible. And if I scan a LinkedIn profile, because I usually take like 10 seconds to scan one, this is one of the places I'll go because this tells me, wow, a lot of people think he's good at this or she is good at this if I were looking at someone else's profile. Most people don't do this, but I think it's important because it is additional information. There's an accomplishments section on LinkedIn, and you have to add in material there. They have things like organizations, right? So what organizations you're a member of, which can be useful. Certifications are very important because that is something that people will search on. And if you have an actual certification, that adds and moves you up in search. So if you're wondering, well, what else is under accomplishments and where is it? If you're logged into your profile, it's just to the right. There's this blue box. And when you click on the blue box, this menu pops up. And it has things like publications, certifications, courses, projects. So if you do a lot of additional learning work in courses, you might want to do that. If you do projects, this is another way. Let's say you can't fit everything on your LinkedIn profile, or you don't want it to be really busy and you want to pull some really big projects out. You could put them here under projects and they show up in your profile. And that also helps you with search results because you've got more words in your profile. And so if you do a accounting system overhaul, or if you do a lot of risk management, or let's say launch an innovation agenda within compliance, or any of the different elements of your work, you can keep it high level. You don't have to give away names or a lot, but you can let people get a sense of what was your role in the project with 3 or 4 sentences and what did it accomplish. And so I would get a sense of, oh, I did a cross-functional enterprise-wide technology overhaul or something like that. So there's a lot of extra things you can put in here: languages, awards, patents. I don't think I've seen test scores used, to be honest, but languages for sure. Patents, projects, those are all a great way, publications, to show your thought leadership. And when we click to his profile live, I'll show you where that goes. The last one is less important than the others, but it still says something. So on your LinkedIn profile, you can have interests. And that ends up being, what companies are you following? What groups are you part of? What schools did you go to? And then, although Salim doesn't follow anybody, which influencers do you follow on LinkedIn? So this is helpful because if you're following companies you work with or collaborate with, you'll get news, whatever they push out through their company page on your LinkedIn feed. If you join the AGA group, for example, you'll get information from that. You could also go into those groups and chime in with advice or insight or ask questions. So a lot of people don't use groups. I wouldn't join 100, which is the limit. I would pick a couple that really are important for your network. It's a really good way to share expertise, advice, and connect with people that maybe you don't have a connection with on LinkedIn directly, but through the groups you can meet them and connect. So just something to think about. Again, if I looked at this, is there any organization here that does innovative stuff, strategic stuff, is relevant? You know, I think that's something that I look at, and most people probably don't. I would more look at who are you following, who are your influencers. So just be mindful that every little bit of this matters. All right, so we're going to see how this goes. So I'm going to walk through a couple of changes just so you can see how some of this works. One of the things that I'm going to add that is not on here yet, I think actually, you know what, I did add one yesterday. So let's see, is there anything else I want to put? Here's where skills are, if you're looking for skills, and then accomplishments, where you can put in publications. Salim does have a publication, but I was having a little bit of a tough time finding it, but that would be a good thing to add. Under projects, I'm going to click on project, because this is an easy one that most people do not take advantage of. And let's see. I'm going to grab something from his resume and pop it in here. And so the good thing about projects, it used to be that projects was associated by job, as were recommendations. The recommendations I liked because then I could get a sense of when's the last time you had a recommendation. But now all the projects are bundled together, and so are the recommendations and projects. They're all bundled together. There's no real separation by job. You can still see which job it was associated with. So I'm actually going to add a project for the Smithsonian role, which I haven't added before. So let's see. So this was a financial management technology upgrade. I'm going to call it this. I'm sure Salim will correct me later. And then what you would also do is put in your year, and then you can also put in a description. The paste function isn't working great for me, but I would put in a description. So it's led cross-functional teams and SMEs to develop an institution-wide online platform for training. So I could type in led a cross-functional team designing, developing, and launching an online training program for SMEs in the financial management area. And I could associate it with a role, which was at Smithsonian. If you had a video, some people do big projects that are communicated and have press releases externally. You could put a link to something. If you had, let's say, a group of people, right? So he was on a cross-functional team, which he said. Then what you could do is also add people. So you could add another contributor. So if you're in a small team or doing projects, this is a great way at the end of the meeting, at the wrap-up. Maybe you all go on LinkedIn, one of you creates the project, and you add the 5 people on the project that did it with you. I've had people want to add projects and then feel weird because if people that were on the team went to their profile and saw they had it on the profile, they would be upset that they didn't include them, and as if they were the only person on the team. This is a very nice way to solve that problem. The one thing I'll point out right now, so many of you may know that on LinkedIn in the past, before they changed the format, any change you made to your profile, if you saved it, would automatically update your network unless you had turned that off. Now, anytime you go to edit, this is where that button is. And so if I were to publish this now, nobody would know. But let's say before Salim joined as the president chapter of the president chapter, he could come in and add that as a role. He would turn this on, add it as a role, and then publish it, and everybody would know, oh, look, he's joined as president. So there aren't many cases where you would want to push information out, but if you are doing a role change or adding something, that's one way to do it. So I'm going to close this. I'm not going to save it because I don't want to put something in there if it's not perfect. That is one place where you could add projects. This is where you would add a summary. So you would click this little pencil right here. I did put in his summary. This is from a bio that I found at the George Mason talk. Some of you may be wondering, what do I put in the summary, and is it first person or third person? It should be first person, which this is not, but I did not have a ton of time to go and really overhaul this the way I would. It's not bad, it's better than not having one. I typically do this in first person, so it's easier for the person reading it. And then the rest of the profile is in third person. And so for this profile, or for any LinkedIn summary, the tip I would share is to think about using structure, so 3 paragraphs, short paragraphs, 3 or 4 sentences each max. And you could start with the why. So if anybody's seen Simon Sinek, the why, what, and the how, leadership and action. The why could be, why are you in this role? Why are you in this field? What is it that you love about what you do? It doesn't have to be cheesy. It can just be, this is what made me get into this space. The second paragraph would be the what. So 3 or 4 sentences about what have you done? So what's the last project you work on? What's the impact? How many people do you work with? So think about what would give someone, if they were scanning, some good information. Some people do bullet that and put, scope of work. That's up to you. And then I think the last one really is the how. So how do you do your work? Are you collaborative? Are you, do you have empathy? Are you good at listening? So think about all of those things as you might be writing your summary. I'm going to scroll down a little bit. Any questions on the summary? Okay, one of the things people always ask me, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, we do have one. Actually, okay, how far back should your profile include? Last 10 to 15 years or more relevant, 5 years or less?
Yeah, it definitely shouldn't be 5 years. It should not be more than 20 for sure. It probably should be 15. There are a couple of things that depends on. One, it depends on which roles were most interesting. If you have a couple that are really important to the arc of your brand and your story, and let's say you wanted to go into a different role, but you hadn't been in that role for 10 years. You might want to include 1 or 2 roles that goes back further. There is ageism, so you should not have stuff that's more than 20 years, sometimes more than 15. If you can get all of what you want across in 15, fabulous. 5 makes it look like you just came out of school, which I know people can look at education and sort of figure that out, but it also may not give you enough content to let them know what you can do. And so you don't want to cut off your story too short. Most people have 2 jobs over 5 years, maybe 3, so you may not capture everything you want.
Thanks. One other question. How does LinkedIn populate the individuals and the people most viewed on your profile?
These are people that are similar to you. So people also viewed. Whenever someone comes to Salim's page, this is who they might go look at next. So it's based on who comes to your profile. As far as who's viewed your profile, obviously that's who's actually come to your profile. If you have the free version, you will not see everyone because you have to pay for being able to see up to like 200 people. This will tell you how much you soap and search. So if you started changing stuff, so I worked on Salim's profile yesterday and the day before. I will tell you I could go look tomorrow, Monday, and I will see it change already. A post view is like if you were putting stuff on LinkedIn, you'd see a change. He has not posted anything, so there's nothing here. Even though his profile is now all-star and it was not before. So you'll see I've got the roles, which I shared earlier, the media. Let me show you something just briefly. When you add some new roles, let's say you join an organization, this icon here allows you to move a role as long as you are currently working there, up or down. So if you wanted to add AGA to your profile, since we did that with Salim, but I don't want it to be the first thing people see because you have a day job, then you would click and drag the Department of Transportation up or down based on where you need it to go. And if you needed to add a role, you would click this plus sign and add a role. Now, one thing that if you were going to add or edit, it looks the same. So here's where you could come in and type extra words for your title. Here's where you would type what's the company and make sure the logo pulls up. It is important to put location. That matters. When you add a new role, it's going to ask you to update your headline. You do not want to do that. That will change the headline under your profile picture, which we just so nicely recrafted. So don't do that. If you were going to add a document, let's say it's a new brochure about the organization or some marketing collateral that might be useful for people that come to your profile, you can upload things. Let's say you wanted to put a link to the website. Either way, you would click and either paste in a link to the file or to a YouTube video, which is great, and then you'd click add and it would show up here. So this is where to add a link or video. Questions on that piece? That is one of the most under-leveraged things. I don't add media to every single role. I think it's important to make your current role and the role before it look exceptional. If you go back further, that's fabulous, but people really want to know, what did you do recently? Because that tells me what you might be able to do next. So this is the other volunteer experience. Do add things in. I did remove the Boy Scouts from the actual experience section and I just left it here. These are the featured skills and endorsements where you can edit or add a new skill. I'll show you what that looks like real quick and then we'll keep on going. So this is again where you would reorder. You could just drag and drop. And so if we wanted to say, oh, risk management is even more important, we could move it up. I would recommend adding innovation, but we can talk about that later. There are no recommendations, so I will get ready to talk about the next. Do you want to take me back to the PowerPoint if you don't mind? I can only drive so much. Thank you very much. So hopefully that was helpful. What I want to share next, because these are some things that were not available on Salim's profile. So the bare minimum is have your profile look good, right? Maybe even great, I hope. The second thing is to share information. So on the left, this is a post from me. I know people don't like video, but this was a video that I took on my phone and you can now upload via the mobile app for LinkedIn. And so that video has actually been seen, I think, like 1,800 times. I don't think much to my chagrin, but kind of. It is a little bit alarming to know that. But if you have an important message, that can be a good way to deliver content, especially if you're at a conference and you want to share some insights from a conference, which is what I was doing. The one on the right, so let's say you get a great piece of advice. You can share that, right? Or let's say you find a great article. You can share that. Now, this is something a friend of mine, Mark Silverman, shared with me. Because people usually say I'm sorry a lot, he said, stop saying I'm sorry, just say thank you, right? So if you're late to a meeting, instead of saying I'm sorry, say thank you. Thank you for your patience. I really appreciate it. Look how many times this was viewed. And that was probably a few days ago, right? So 3,700 views. What a really great outcome for not a lot of money or time. And when we think about the 4 I's from before, inform, inspire, influence, ignite, this is a great informational tip that I'm sharing. So again, personal branding is not personal bragging. It's not about me. I will show you in a minute how to tag someone so their name shows up blue, or I'll talk about it at least. The other thing is recognize others. So do join a group and go chime in. If you're unsure about what to put out into the online world, start by congratulating someone for, hey, that was a great talk yesterday, or that was an awesome event. Congratulations on your award. People generally don't want to talk about themselves, so if you can help them by talking about them for them, it's better. Provide relevant information. So we talked about adding media, checklist, video. You get to decide. If you're on a board, so this is a board I sit on, add it. It shows that you're doing leadership in the community and in your space. Just like having the AGA now on Selena's profile is nice. An easy first thing you could do, even today, is write a recommendation for someone. This is different than an endorsement. You have to go to someone's profile and click on the top of their profile. There's 3 little dots. I'll show you where they are. Click on it and write a recommendation. This can be 3 or 4 sentences. It can be 5. It doesn't have to be that long. But if you give recommendations, that's really important. If you get them, if you get 12 or more, you move up in search results. It's a really intentional way for LinkedIn to say your network values you. So this is one also where you don't have to post your own content. This is one where this guy, Alan Gannett, was asking, what does everyone think about hashtags on LinkedIn? If you don't know what a hashtag is, it's a way to track a conversation. It works effectively on Twitter. People are starting to use it more on LinkedIn and for sure on Facebook. So I answered his question and said, well, I tagged the CEO of LinkedIn. I said, I agree with Jeff. He said that he thought it was fabulous. And then I put my thoughts, which was only use 1 or 2, don't overkill. And then I provided a link to an article that gave more ideas. That's an easy thing to do. So you could comment and give a shout out to someone you know who's done volunteer work. That's another idea. Take a picture of your team at an event and share it. Highlight a community partner by tagging them with the @ sign. So that's how you tag someone. Type @ and their name, and they'll show up in a drop down, and you can click on the right person. If you wanted to be really crazy and brave, you could write a blog or what LinkedIn calls an article and post it. A great way to do that might be interview a new team member, and maybe that's something you post. I know blogging scares people, so I don't want you to feel too much pressure. So just to recap, here's what we did. We added a banner and make sure you have a new banner. We already have a headshot that was good. We updated the title. We added in the bio. We added information under experience. We created a project. Well, we didn't publish it, but we talked about it. Ask for recommendations. That's what we would do next with Salim. He did speak. So if you speak or go to conferences, you might want to add a speaker role. People search for that, especially if speaking is important to get visibility for your organization. Again, maybe write a blog. I talked to Salim about interview members of the AGA in the DC market. It could be 5 questions. It's always the same 5, but that's what you publish on your LinkedIn profile. Easy to do because he doesn't have to come up with his own stuff, and a great way to highlight members of AGA. And then maybe post content. So some of the examples I shared about inspiration and things like that. Oh, so just as we wrap up, and then I'll take questions, here's what I want you to think about. We talked about a lot of stuff and a lot of things you can do. The reality is just have a plan, right? Have a plan and pick what works for you. For Salim, and this is one that I made up, he has not agreed to it yet, but it could look something like this. We talked about the 3 circles, right? We said, here's what he wants to be known for. Well, what does that look like? Well, maybe he reaches up and follows up with someone 2 to 3 times a week. If he's out talking with people in AGA, if he's doing work, obviously at DOT, then he's seeing a lot of people. So send them a message and say, hey, thanks, it was great seeing you. Or connect with them, send a connection request with a personalized note. Maybe weekly, he writes some he does some recognition, writes a recommendation. Maybe he does that once a month. He gets to pick. Bi-weekly, maybe he goes to the AGA LinkedIn group and writes something. Hey, here's a new question, or hey, what does the chapter think about this? Maybe he shares an article once every 2 weeks. Maybe he does things once a month about AGA events on the AGA group page or on his personal one. So these are some ideas. So just think about, maybe it's one thing this month, maybe it's one thing next month. Pick, but do you have a plan and put it on your calendar, or you probably won't do it? I know, at least that's how I am. So here's what I would recommend for you, and then let's open up to QA. One, identify what's missing from your LinkedIn profile and what's missing from your sort of personal marketing plan, and what can you do to improve it if your brand was working for you. You may need to get a new headshot. That's okay. I have someone. If anybody needs one, let me know. You may need to update your title, maybe add a banner photo. Maybe it's of a team building event. Maybe it's something else. Just do a shout out. Maybe your goal is, in the month of October, I'm going to identify one person and give them a shout out. It could be an AGA group, it could be on LinkedIn, but that's your strategy. Sit down and think about what's happening the rest of the year or even into next year where LinkedIn would be useful. Maybe you need to meet some new people because there are new partners coming up and you want to go ahead and connect proactively. The big thing would be find someone that you can grab coffee with and you can do it together, because sometimes if we leave ourselves to our own devices, we don't update things. So make sure after today, think about who could you do this with, where once a month you meet and grab coffee and you say, hey, what did you do on LinkedIn last month? What are you doing next month? So I hope these tips were helpful. It's very important to be on LinkedIn. Thank you for folks who asked questions. I'm happy to take some questions right now in the last 5 minutes. If we have more.
Hi, Jen. Yeah, Susan. Let's see here. Can I add a picture? Example, as a speaker, I'd like to add a picture of the audience attending my AGA session. So can I just add a picture?
Yeah, so
where would that be?
Great question. So as long as the conference got permission, right, because you're sharing a photo of people, and they have that sort of signed off when people bought a ticket or gave the disclosure, sure. If it's the backs of their heads, not a problem. If you're facing the audience and like doing a selfie, I probably wouldn't post that without their permission. But absolutely, any evidence you have, I love seeing pictures of people speaking or demonstrating what their brand is about. Sometimes we just haven't gotten a picture because we forgot. And so then you could just take a screenshot of the conference page or a flyer from the conference, and that's sort of the next best thing. But yeah, in action is great.
Someone else has a question about the blue section. She says she doesn't have that. The blue section on the right. What was that?
Yeah, that was the adding accomplishments and adding new sections. So I will tell you, LinkedIn does have different layouts for people. A couple, I don't know how many. So what I would suggest is if that person could reach out to me and I will look at their page and help them. Some things are located in different places. And I think that's LinkedIn's way of testing the layout and the user experience, unfortunately. But I'm happy to help them offline for sure. It's there, it's just not, like you said, it's not up top.
Okay, let's see, someone's saying, okay, if you haven't been, this is like me, and I'm not asking it, but someone else did. But I would ask it too. If you haven't been active in ever, do you just sort of come out all of a sudden, or do you need to provide an explanation, like publicly acknowledge?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So if you don't have a LinkedIn profile, make one. I'm going to assume the question is about someone who has one, but they've never been active. Some people feel like if they go change their profiles, people are going to think they're looking for a job right away. So if you want to ease into it and maybe fix one thing a week or try one thing a week or every other week and ease into it. Another great thing to do is if you have a team, do it all together in your next team meeting and just say, hey, as part of our professional development, I would love for our team to look better on LinkedIn so we represent ourselves and our team and our company better. That's a great way to do it where it's safe and people aren't like, oh, are you looking for a job? Because surprisingly, people actually do pay attention to that. At least that's what I hear. Great question. Hopefully that helps.
Another person says, if a person has a gap in employment, let's say you stayed at home for a while or, you know, had a child, how would you recommend acknowledging this? They're wondering if there'll be bias, you know, to someone being at home for a while.
Absolutely. That definitely is possible. So some things you could do. If you were active in other ways, let's say you volunteered, you could put that in your profile so there's not a gap. If you weren't active, some people might do part-time work, like flex professionals for working, for moms who are stepping out of the workforce for a moment and then coming back. So I think if proactively you can think about that, it's important. It is weird when you have a gap. And so I think it depends on what else you could put there that would be okay. And that is a hard one and it is an issue for sure. But you can't leave yours off, right? So.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, it is 3 o'clock and I don't see any more questions here. Any parting words from you, Jen, before we close out?
Yeah, I would just say connect with me on LinkedIn if you want to practice sending a personalized note. You have to go to my profile and click the connect button to do that. If you have questions, definitely email me. I think they will be providing that. And if not, if you don't get that easily, do go to brandmirror.com and you can grab time with a complimentary consult. It's 30 minutes, no charge. I really just want to help people. So if that's useful, do reach out. Thank you so much for your time. I hope this was helpful and I really appreciate the opportunity.
We appreciate you, Jen. I know Key and I picked up a lot of good information. We got inspired to get out there and update our site. So thank you very much. Thank you for all of our members listening today. And just as a reminder, to receive your CPE credit, please close your browser to activate the survey. So we look forward to doing our next free member webinar in December. Details will be in the topics newsletter. Thanks and have a great day, everybody. Bye. Bye.
Bye.